was just welcoming everyone. We're very excited to kick this off with our first session here. This is a project that's been near and dear to Ira's heart. We'll let Ira talk a little bit more about that. This is something that he's done over the years. Ira's been practicing for 50 years. We've been in this building for over 40 years. We're celebrating our 49th anniversary soon. And so tomorrow. Okay, so very soon, I didn't lie. And so Ira and I thought it would be a nice time to bring this classroom to courtroom program back. And the faculty we have, it blows my mind. I mean, I'm starstruck when I see our Zooms. I see Judge Suarez, Richard Cole. We have federal judges, state court judges, professors, some of the best and brightest legal minds in all of Florida as our faculty members. And I really think that if you all stick around and come to future sessions and really make the most out of these programs, it's going to be a lot that you get out of it in a very short amount of time. So again, we're very happy to have all of you here. Please introduce yourselves to each other, to me. I want to get to know all of you better. I think we can make this a great networking thing as well as the education component to it. So we're all very excited. So Ira, with that.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Hi, everybody. Hey, Rick.
Hi, Ira.
Hey, Richard.
Hi.
Without having my back to too many people, let me start off by saying how this idea got started. About a dozen years ago, we had a classroom to courtroom series that I did in North Carolina, Michigan, and Redondo Beach, California, not here in Florida. And it turned out to be very successful. Now the lawyers from those days are veteran lawyers. I'm still hearing from them. So the idea then and the idea now is to share a lot of experiences, some mistakes that I've made along the way, and some things that we've done right, as Justin has alluded to. We have been here 40 years, which is a long time. The articles of incorporation of the firm I looked at was October 15th of 1976. So by my math, that's 49 years. So tomorrow. And so just to keep things a little contemporary about dates and times. And this is the Classroom to Courtroom series, but we're going to cover in 10 months, 10 sessions, we're going to cover a lot of different areas, sort of things that you couldn't get in law school because it just wasn't part of the curriculum. So along those lines, we have 3 law school professors, 3 panel members, and 3 advisors who are running the trial skills program at their law school. One is my very dear lifetime friend, Justice Fred Lewis, who is a co-sponsor of this and who I've spoken to a number of times. Chief Justice Lewis is going to be part of the program next month. The other is H.T. Smith, another lifetime friend who is also a law professor and teaching and has a lot to contribute as well. H.T. has been practiced criminal defense law and more, and he's terrific. And the third is the Lonnie Rose, who has been at the University of Miami forever and ever, and I remember from the beginning of all this. And Lonnie, and we're going to have, so we have 3 law professors who have an idea about the exposure that law students got then. And then we have a bunch of good people. I think just looking at the advisors, you can tell where the program was going. And let me say parenthetically that there wasn't one person that I approached to ask Richard and the others, Rick, that said no, not one. So to get everyone together was not so hard. And just to give you the rundown of the diversity of the group, just starting anywhere, we have 4 federal judges and 1 federal magistrate, Deisha Shore Wilder, Judge Moreno, Judge Huck, Judge Altman. I'm sure I'm missing somebody. We have the 2 managing partners of the 2 largest, I think, largest law firms in Florida, to contribute, Richard Cole and Jared Davis at Greenberg Trorwood is on the panel. So I think that's good. We can get perspectives from larger firms. We have the chief judge of the third DCA and the former chief judge of the third DCA, Rick Suarez, is here, and the present chief judge, Ed Scales, who couldn't be here, but sends his regards. We have a former U.S. attorney, Kendall Coffey. We have 3 circuit court judges, including my nepotistic move of including my sister as a former circuit court judge. But Ellen, after 19 years on the bench, she's going to do a panel with Judge Hirsch, who is mourning the loss of the Cubs. He is a big Cubs fan, and he is very sad. But that isn't why he isn't here. He's doing something else. And my partner, Justin, who you just met, HT, Rick Suarez, the state attorney's office being represented by Steve Talpins, but also Kathy Fernandez-Rundle. So it's quite a group. The Florida Bar has also been involved, and we have a member of the bar in case anybody misbehaves. So that gives you an idea of where the birth of this idea came from. It was conversations. There's a lot of people. Are we losing trial lawyers? Is the heritage, the rich heritage that made South Florida the mecca of trial lawyers, is that going to become a thing of the past? I say no. There's an article in your package that I think is certainly worth taking a look at that got a wide publication I wrote about a year ago called All Rise, No Fries. And it's an interesting article about young lawyers who went into court and forgot to rise when the judge took the bench. The bailiff had to remind them of this custom and respect. They forgot to rise, and they were quickly reminded. And it's a combination of that and a phenomenal restaurant in California, a barbecue place that will not sell French fries to go. No matter what you do, you can't get fries. And the article sort of puts those two things together. It's called All Rise, No Fries. And so you may be interested in looking at. Also in your package material, Carmen, who still may be here, went through some of the publications that I've done for different programs and put together like the top 10, the top 15, the golden rules of building a practice, which is today's topic, is building. And it's not starting a practice, it's building a practice. And I will share with you, I don't think it's breaching any confidences. I had a meeting also with Jared Davis at Greenberg, who is a phenomenal person and a very knowledgeable guy. And I said to him, which is a pretty good question, how do you become the managing partner of a 2,000 or 3,000 person firm with offices in Tel Aviv and everywhere else? How did that happen? He's a very humble, modest guy. And he said, Ira, he said, I was always available. Night and day, whenever they needed somebody in this size firm, I made myself available. I said, well, I'm going to share that with the group, and then you can share it when it's your time to come. He said, it didn't hurt that I had a lot of technological background. He said, but that was a big part of it. And so we have people on the advisory panel, from the Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court, retired, to private practitioners, Kendall Coffey, prior U.S. attorney, and Clancy Bounds, who's not on, a friend of mine in Orlando, who's a very good trial lawyer. And so I gathered ideas, and also not just ideas, but I gathered inspiration from a lot of these folks. I said, Ira, let's see what we can do, particularly Judge Huck, who practiced in the same firm that I started in about 50 years ago, and then he went on the bench. Judge Huck and Moreno in particular are very, very interested in maintaining, and if you saw the article that Judge Scola just published, which is in the materials about trial lawyers and trials becoming a dying breed, you can see that there's concern. Now, I want to say as a personal note that the practice of trial law is very rewarding. Not financially just, but in life. I mean, if it wasn't, why would I be standing here 50 years later? I mean, a long time, I tried my first case in 1973 in Key West. So it seems to me that there's a lot of longevity and a lot to do that makes this area of law, and Richard and I have been friends probably all that time. And so I wanted to go over some golden rules of trial practice and building your practice. And just to show that we sort of practice what we preach in terms of classroom to courtroom, we have yesterday brought into the firm as a new lawyer to be Anthony Dominguez, sitting right here, right? Anthony is at the top of his class at the University of Miami Law School. He graduates in May, takes the bar, he'll be here. He's been clerking for us for over a year, done a wonderful job. And so he is literally coming from the classroom to the courtroom. I mean, a shining example. And there are other examples of things that have been repetitive over the years that have worked. There's a couple that maybe have not worked that I really think I could have done better about. But these golden rules, usually you see an article, you see somebody say, oh, there's 10 golden rules, 12 golden rules, or whatever. My number is about 840 because it's a long time. There's just things that keep recurring, themes and ideas that keep recurring. And one of those is to become known, make yourself known for something in the practice of law. Make yourself known for an area, a practice area that you are cornering the market on, that people will come to you and then publish, write, speak, write things to the Florida bar, just push it. And I've seen even recently, even up to right now, I've seen in our firm, of course, I've had this talk with everyone in the firm ad nauseum, right? I mean, is find a niche and get good at that. Get known for something. It could be geographic. Maybe people need a lawyer in Key West, and you're known as a lawyer in Key West or Fort Myers or here in Miami. Or maybe they're looking for a lawyer in a particular area of commercial law, bad faith, whatever it may be. Get known for something, because it's a big, broad world out there, and you can't cover all the bases today. And I'll give you a firsthand example, if I don't embarrass Rachel over here, but about 4 years ago, when she was working and completing the Champlain Tower collapse, building collapse, I did not know Rachel. But I knew people that were working on that case that I had a lot of respect for and paid attention. And 3 or 4 of them told me, they said, the person running the show here is Rachel First. I said, wow. I said, that's great. They said, no matter what anyone else says, she's the one that people are listening. This came from the mediator, it came from a couple of other people that I think know what they're talking about. So when the case was over with an outstanding result, I made it my mind to meet Rachel. I said, hey, people saying these great things about her, I should know her. So we went out to lunch, and probably over the last 4 years, we've done it a couple of times, but we're in touch. She and I have spread what I would call a strategic alliance. We're friends in business. We can talk to each other about cases. One of the people on our panel is the past president of the Florida Bar, Roland Sanchez Medina, another very good friend of mine. And Roland and I just drove down to Key West to put on a program down there last week, 4 hours down and 4 hours back. But we covered a lot of territory and a lot of cross exchange of information about lawyers, and reputations, and more than just reputations, but building a name for yourself, And so Rachel, who did all this really great work, got a really great result. She and I have maintained this business and friendship because it's comfortable, because it works. And I would encourage you all in the building of your practice to think like a builder, whether you're thinking like an architect, designing, or an engineer, or a contractor. Think like a builder. that you're going to build something for yourself. So in doing that, there's just some absolute things that I think cannot go overlooked. And one of them, for sure, is answering your phone calls. This is if you speak to the Florida bar, which I do also about this, and we have a bar member on the panel, this is the big deal. Lawyers failing to communicate with their clients. You know, a lawyer or an intake person signs up the case, and then they never hear from a lawyer. They don't hear from anybody for a year, and in a year they hear your deposition is set. We need to talk to you. Or they hear there's an offer in the case that they're shocked about how low it is. Or they hear something that you could call up and say, well, the plaintiff's lawyer says, well, we've decided we can't take your case and the statute of limitations runs in a month, you know, in a malpractice case. Or they hear on the defense side the bad news, but it's always delayed. So communication is one of these 787 golden rules, at least. You know, answer your phone calls and reach out and network and don't be shy. Another one is if you're going to be a builder, have something that you can share with the public. Getting to trial, it used to be enough back in the day. It used to be enough to try cases. Richard will and Rick will confirm this. You try the case. Rick was a defense lawyer for Corlett, Killian, Sykes, and who else, Rick?
Ed Corlett, Mike Sykes, Dan Killian,
Right.
Hardiman.
Very fine defense firm that I tried cases against. Rick was there. And Richard, of course, started his firm, I don't know, 40 something years ago, and has built it to be this magnificent statewide firm. But Richard tried cases. I had cases with him as well. So if you can get to trial, do that. If you can't get to trial at any juncture of your early juncture of your career, there's other things you can do. You can observe trials. The federal bench through this program now has called up, and Judge Moreno called recently, Evan, where's Evan? Evan clerked for Judge Moreno before he came here and brought a lot of good ideas. And when I talk about building a niche or something that you're known for, I can tell you that contemporaneous now, we had the same conversation with another lawyer, Eric Shane, who's not here right now, but a very fine lawyer in our firm, the same conversation about getting known for something. And in 2 years, Eric has carved out a really strong specialization in Legionnaire's disease. I mean, I never heard much. We had done some, but not much. He's got 3 or 4 good results, impressive results. And if you look up Legionnaire's disease online, you see Eric. He's now the king of Legionnaire's disease because he did that. Evan worked on a case that in my whole life I'll never be able to pronounce, but he's going to tell you about that case. It's the only one maybe in the world. What was the name of that case, Evan?
Vibrio vulnificus.
Vibrio vulnificus. A Vibrio vulnificus case. Now, the facts of that case I really don't know as well as I should, but it had something to do with our client swimming in a dolphin. Is that right? In a dolphin pool that was contaminated with this bacteria, and he had an open wound. That's it? Okay. So I mean, if there's another case that I can't pronounce like that one, online they will find Evan. So the idea of picking your lane, pick a lane and stay in the lane. Don't try to compete with billboard advertisers, or don't try to compete with other firms in your particular area on things that you can't compete with. But push yourself to get into some areas that are a little different and where you can establish a great reputation. The other things that I often talk about with this faculty here, that I often talk about is case selectivity. I don't care if it's a commercial case, defense case, although I don't think the defendants have much choice about sometimes the cases they have to take. But case selectivity is the difference between success and not success in what lawyers do. When I was practicing with my first firm, which Judge Huck was in only a little earlier than me before he went on the bench, there was a lawyer in the firm. The name of the firm was Frates, Floyd, and Pearson. But Bill Frates was a giant. He represented Ehrlichman and Gorgie, Charles. And there was a lawyer that was constantly going to court and constantly losing. He picked the wrong cases, and he just, he was busy. He was taking depositions. He was spending money. He was doing everything busy, but bad case selectivity buried him, and ultimately his career. And speaking of careers, we all know, unfortunately, of some people who just crash and burn. And I wanted to mention that early on in the building phase and the trial phase. There have been some extremely talented and wonderful lawyers who fell into one of the deadly sins in life: substance abuse, bad judgment of different types, greed. I could spend 2 hours on what I've seen with greed. And they were just, everyone was talking about them, and then they would discard. They did their trust account. And so, everybody knows the stories. Not everybody knows the people, but I can tell you that it's a very destructive force, that the people that are meteoric in their careers, and then they're not meteoric. And so I don't want to advocate slow and steady, because I'm not a slow and steady guy myself, but I do want to advocate some sort of measured response forward. I think the people that know me all my life, people that are queued in here, and Justin, who's been here 15 years, came as a law clerk at the state, they would tell you that I'm reasonably, I hope, middle of the road about getting things done. And now with technology being what it is, I don't know if technology is the blessing or the curse. It is a great equalizer because people can reach many more people. We have somebody, Sophie, who's here somewhere, who that's what she does all day long. She blogs, she reaches out to people, she helps organize events, and she's terrific. But it is an equalizer, but it always amazes me how people can say anything online. I look online at lawyers who in Google and $18 billion in results. They're 27 years old, and they have $18 billion in results. So tried more cases than anyone, or number one lawyer in Key West. They're not even in Key West. They're in Sarasota, but they have a sign in Key West or a placard on a door. So the online, the technology is a double-edged sword. I think it makes us very efficient. And if you read the article about all rise, no fries, you'll see that's pointed out fairly well. So I want to tell you a little story about networking and about building your practice. This isn't necessarily about starting your practice. When I was with my first firm, which I really had tremendous mentors, and that's what's missing today, the opportunity for people to be exposed to other people and their wisdom, and their non-wisdom, mistakes. So I was in a firm that was very well known. We had 9 really strong lawyers, and then there was me. And one of our partners, Ray Pearson, who was a former circuit court judge, went to a wedding, and seated next to him was a couple, Jim and Candy Corbier. Now this is a long time ago, and Jim Corbier said to Ray Pearson, what do you do? Ray said, I'm a lawyer. He said, well, I may need a lawyer someday. Can you give me your card? Ray didn't have a card. And so he wrote his phone number and name on a napkin at the wedding. I tell this story quite often, the napkin story. And maybe 2 months later, tragically, Candy Corbier was struck by a Miami Herald truck. And Richard, you may remember the Corbier case. It was pretty famous back in the day. She was struck and tragically injured, paralyzed. And Jim Corbier didn't know a lawyer, except he had kept the napkin, right? So he called Ray Pearson. Ray brought him into the firm, and fast forward, that case was resolved for, in those days, what was a lot of money, which was over $5 million on a napkin. So, here in the office, Justin and the other people in the office, they'll tell you that I do tend to rant a little bit about this, but when we go out to lunch, or you go to a place where you're doing business of one way or another, and young lawyers say, well, how can I start? How can I bring in clients? You know, my firm is billing $700 an hour and I can't develop that type of business, or nobody knows me, I'm brand new. You know, I will go on about if you strike up a rapport with people in your life, either people who are in retail, people at a salon, people at a restaurant, how many people a day do you think a busy bartender at a restaurant meets a day? 20, 30? How many people a day do I meet standing here? None, except Justin and Evan and the other people here. I don't. So it is amazing how that works. You know, people don't know lawyers, and they don't want to go to somebody who's impersonal on a billboard or on an ad that says something that I can't make any sense of it anyhow. So, you know, it's like, you know, don't be shy about it. You know, I have a habit or a way of doing things that, you know, we'll go out to lunch, or sometimes it's dinner, or sometimes it's just someone you meet and you say, well, you know, I'm a lawyer here in Coconut Grove, please take my card. And they're happy to do it. You know, they're happy to have somebody who took the time to work with them. So, so that type of networking, the one-to-one stuff, I would tell you, as long as we're staying contemporaneous with the day, with Evan's vibrophibius thing, and Eric's Legionnaire's disease, and Anthony's new job today, which I unfortunately do remember what happened this morning. Today, as I walked in the door, Grace, who's been with us 37 years, and Carmen, who's been with us 37 years, still here, Gloria, who was with me 48 years and is coming by tomorrow to celebrate our anniversary. The staff, the people you work with, should never be taken for granted. Nobody gets anywhere. I mean, I practiced a long time, and let's just say, you know, things have gone well, but they don't go well by themselves. And the lawyers and the staff that you're with are key. So I have a few remarks about almost anything that happens during the course of the day, but I walk through the door, and Grace, a real live receptionist, no dial one, RKS, and no, none of that, just you know, Grace is here, she knows everybody. Grace, I walked in, she's, Miss Lewis, we have to take this call. So I said, sure. I said, can I put down my things here? And it's a client who came from a family member that we represented some years ago. And the client's now family, her niece and her niece's fiance, were in a horrible motor vehicle collision. And we came highly recommended. They called, we spoke to them. And before the day was over today, we had already initiated discovery, had the case signed up, and already started moving forward today to get, and part of the nudging that I do here, I'm a bit of a nudge, part of the nudging is something I truly believe, and that is the first impression you make on a client, whether it's, you know, an insurance adjuster or a claims manager or a plaintiff's client, the first impression you make is the one that they remember, that they think about you, the very first thing you do. So when a client calls you and you get the case going, and they get that day by email or some manner, they get the work going, say, this is for me, I made the right choice. And the same is true downstream about reporting to clients. I mean, I really do this, or at least I ask everyone now to do it. You know, if you're in the middle of a 2-year litigation, it's year one and a half, and you win a motion in court. You win a motion to compel, or you defeat a summary judgment or a motion to dismiss, whatever it is. Take a moment and drop a note to your client. Dear Mrs. Jones, today there was a hearing on a discovery motion. We prevailed. We wanted you to know. So Mrs. Jones now, who doesn't hear from lawyers typically, Mrs. Jones has a piece of paper, or at least an email, that says, my lawyer won today. And then Mrs. Jones goes out to the pool and visits with her friends, or she goes to work, or whatever she does. Mrs. Jones knows more people than we do. Mrs. Jones says, man, my lawyer just wrote me today. And he won. He won that motion to compel interrogatory number 12. Not a big deal, but winning is good. So then that person at her place of work says, oh, well, I need a lawyer, and my cousin needs a lawyer. What's your lawyer's name that just won this case? And she said, well, I have it right here. He just emailed me. So these sound pretty simple in building your practice. But, to me, and this is all sort of in the papers that I included, maybe even better the way I did it. But to me, it's like common sense. When I started my practice, my mom managed a 248 unit apartment building out near the airport. She collected the rent, plumbing, whatever went wrong. And there wasn't one of the 248 people in that complex near the airport that didn't know her son was a lawyer. I mean, that was just it, and I think during the course of her time there, she probably generated 5 or 6 pretty good cases. So this type of networking, what I've tried to do in my practice, and remember, well, you not remember, but I started out sharing office space in an office downtown with Evelyn Greer. I rented space from her. There was one of us, that was me. And, and that was the practice. When I got going, my wife came in and licked envelopes to seal the announcements and the sponge. So I think that type of approach of being bold, be a bit of a pioneer, and find an area that you like and dive in. If you want to coach your child's softball team, if you want to be part of your child's class, if you want to be involved in any activity that interests you, do it. Things that you like, and the people you'll meet there are people that generally are not lawyers. They're just people going to softball practice, or people going to a meeting of some sort of a church or synagogue, wherever it may be. If you like it, be part of it. And along with that, this is, in baseball, we have this saying about being a 5-tool player. Do everything, 5 tools: hit, run, bat, all that, power. And I started writing at a very early juncture of my career. I love legal writing. I taught legal writing in different environments, and I stayed at the University of Florida after I graduated and taught 1 year. And I love writing, and so you find something to write about, something that's fun. And I do that as recently as again this week, something that I'm working on. And this Classroom to Courtroom series, it worked before. It was fun, it was productive. And so it took a little bit of work not to get my friends involved, because they were very helpful. A little bit of work to organize it. But it is, as Justin said, a great networking experience. It's a great growth experience. Somebody learned something out of all this. I think that's kind of cool. If you learn from some of the things that I did wrong, the only problem with the things I did wrong is that would be a separate few hours of things that, when I zigged, I should have zagged. But I could have that seminar, 2 things not to do along the way. So I wrote and published. I published in every publication that I could think of, and I try to think of clever, helpful topics. I tried cases. I just looked with Sophie outside. Board certification. I was admitted in 76 and 83. I was board certified. You had to try 30 cases to trial to get board certified. And I did that from at least between 76 and 83, 6 years I tried those cases. And then And they weren't all big cases, I can assure you that. But then, you know, things mushroomed, and one thing led to another. So go to trial. If it's hard to get to trial because of the circumstances at the firm you're in, I will tell you, and there's no reason not to do this. I used to go to the office on Saturdays when I was right out of law school and in a firm, and I used to read the transcripts on appeal of cases that had been tried, the entire transcript, to put myself in the place of being a trial lawyer. I just read the transcripts, the objections, the charge conferences, because the worst thing in the world, and I had this experience, is to go into a courtroom experience where you don't know what in the world is going on. And trust me, I had that. My very first trial, I walked into a disaster. Judge Huck can tell you about that too. It was a case he had worked on as well. I think it's why he left the firm, but it could be. So, you know, try cases or get started. The federal benches offer through this program to let us know when there are trials coming up. Get the feel of being a trial lawyer, because when you're a young trial lawyer, the juries are very forgiving. You can really mess up and they talk to each other to go back and forth. No, but she's young. You know, we'll cut him a little slack. He's a young kid. And you can make some mistakes as a young lawyer. You go in as a little bit more mature lawyer with a little bit of gray hair and you do something dumb, they cut you no slack, you know, and then they think you're just incompetent. You haven't learned, you know, or who are you? So get into court when you're young. Evan's been here less than 2 years. He's already tried one full case to jury trial. He's been to at least 4 seminars nationally that we've gone to New Jersey. There's one every year, to San Francisco. You know, he's gone out and networked. He and Annie met Congressman Swalwell, who was Eric Swalwell at the last conference. So get out there and mix with people and don't be shy. I want to leave enough time for Rachel and for Justin, and I'd be happy now or afterwards to take some questions. I only hit 4 or 5, the way it looks, of my 787 golden rules, and there's some pretty good things here. And just like people will remember the good things you did, you know, the reputation that people will remember what they heard from their peers that Rachel did a great job in the Champlain Tower cases. They will also remember the bad things. And Rick, you've been a judge for a while, and you have friends who are judges. The judges talk to each other. Don't think that they don't say who's been naughty and who's been nice when people go in the courtroom. They do. They communicate, just like the lawyers will say things about judges or about defense lawyers. Richard and I have been friends forever. We've worked together. I kiddingly say, but it's true, about half of the cases we file get assigned to Cole Scott somewhere in the state. It's
your lips to God's ear.
and Richard and my wife and I, we go out to dinner once a month. But you know what, the good things that people say about you resonate and stick. But the people who are cutting corners and cheating and do things and have things filed against them for different reasons, you know, I mean, I just read something where someone was a lawyer was in a case where the defense firm filed a motion for fraud on the court. You know, you don't exactly want to be involved in that kind of stuff. So the bad stuff sticks too. And I think in our firm, I know, and Rich's firm and other firms, when Rick was a defense lawyer with Corlett, you know, people get to know your reputation, and they get to know how you behave and can you be trusted. So the rest of the golden rules will have to wait for another day. This is a 10 part series. Today was just the beginning of all this, and we have some really good things to come. We have some great panelists. It'd be nice to hear from my sister. She has some really good ideas, and also from the large firm Richard Cole and Jared Davis and hear from some of the other people, hear from the appellate lawyers. Rick, we have a panel with you and Ed and some others called A View from the Bench.
Yeah.
That the judges see, and one of the programs is A View from the appellate bench, things that they see, and one is A View from the federal bench, because we have so many good federal judges, and then one is A View from the circuit court bench. So that'll be very interesting. So I'm gonna stop, keep my notes for next time, and hear from Rachel, which I'm very interested in hearing. And then Justin will wrap it up.
I'm happy to. So we're gonna go straight through. We're not giving these kids any breaks, right?
We can take a little break, there's no food, or afterwards, whatever you wanna
I'm
do.
happy to go with it. So, I first of all, good evening.
Rachel, could you get a little closer to the mic?
Microphone, yeah.
I might sit if that's okay, Your Honor. And that way I can kind of see around, and I brought notes with me because I'm a little newer at this than Ira is. But first I just want to thank Ira and his team and Justin and everyone here at Leesfield for inviting me. I'd love to speak to younger lawyers, and I'm happy to speak to you today about how I built my firm and my career, and maybe hopefully you'll take some lessons. I think that my journey is a whole lot different than Ira's, and I've been at it for a lot less time. So in some ways I'm just starting out, at least with my law firm. So I think that from the juxtaposition, hopefully you'll get some interesting takeaways. And I'm also just, another thing, honored to be a part of this faculty. You really, if you attend the 10-part series and you come to all these sessions, you have such an opportunity to learn from so many outstanding lawyers in our community, luminaries and judges. So take the opportunity that Mr. Leesfield has given to us today, and come to as many as you can. So first I want to start out and talk about what I think is the most fundamental building block of building your law firm and your career. And you can start it today, because even if you don't have a firm, you do have your reputation and your credibility. And building your reputation is the most important building block. And I know you hear a lot about it. Your reputation is everything. You can lose it in an instant, but it takes a long time to build. And a lot of those are platitudes, but it really is, it could not be more important. The lawyers that you work with now in your own firms are going to refer you cases in the future. The judges that you appear before you're going to be before again, or they might refer you cases, or will present to you opportunities that you can't imagine. And I'll show you how that played out in my career. And even your clients, you are building your reputation every day, even if your name isn't on the door, with your own clients, and they will think of you when they need another smart, hardworking attorney. So building your own career starts today, and it starts with maintaining your reputation and building it. And every lawyer can tell you a story about how the reputation they built, or somebody they impressed, called them down the road. And I'm just going to share a few of mine. And I was lucky enough, because of my reputation preceded me, as the saying goes, to be the only applicant for a few jobs, not just one, but several. And the first one came because I had done good work at a firm at Ackerman as a summer associate. And my co-summer associate, not even one of my supervisors, but a summer associate who I knew, but wasn't my best friend, recommended me to a federal judge to be a clerk. At that time, I was already an associate at White & Case, so I had done well in law school, I had a good job, but it was because this co-summer associate dropped my name to this federal judge that I was called in for an interview. And that went well, and I was hired. I was the first and only applicant with whom Judge Ungaro met for that position. I did good work, I guess, at that clerkship. I was diligent, hardworking, I stayed late. I like to think I was smart. And after I went back to White & Case following my clerkship, I got a phone call, and it was from an attorney at a plaintiff's firm who had called Judge Ungaro, and he had asked for the name of an attorney about my age and year who could do high-end plaintiff's work in federal court. And he had a specific need, and the judge gave him my name, and he called me. And I went in for an interview, and this was at another plaintiff's firm in town, Grossman Roth. The attorney was a man named Seth Miles, who's a great attorney who now has his own firm. And again, that landed me, in this new position. And at that firm, I spent 9 years sort of learning the ropes as a plaintiff's attorney. And I had been at White and Case, right, for about 5 years and only knew defense work. So there was a lot to learn. And I, again, you apply your work ethic to every new opportunity. When you start in a new position, you start kind of, your reputation precedes you, but when you start a new job, you're starting kind of from zero. Everyone's getting to know you. They're trying to figure out how you work, if you're going to do a good job on your cases. And so that was a process of building your reputation within your firm. Every time you go to a new firm, you have to do it again. So I'm midway through my track and my course of my career at Grossman Roth, and I have occasion to appear before a judge, a Miami-Dade Circuit Court judge, in a civil case. It's a really tough case. It was a case involving quadriplegic. The client was a quadriplegic. He was paralyzed from the neck down. He had been involved in a diving incident and suffered this horrific injury. And it was a case against a national hotel chain with a very difficult, I would say, creative theory of liability. But because the injury was so catastrophic and it was really the only path, I was tapped. We were making the claim, right? We were bringing a lawsuit. And it was my job in that case to defend the motions to dismiss, which we won. And we didn't know we would. We won them. Got past a motion to dismiss, and then ultimately the motions for summary judgment. And I handled all the briefing in that case, the arguments in front of the judge. Ultimately, the case went to trial, the jury instructions, motions in limine, a lot of thorny appellate issues to navigate. And that case settled for, I can't tell you how much, but a good sum right before the verdict came in. So fast forward a few years, and I'm still at this firm. And again, I'm trying to do good work. I had that win in that case, but we've had other wins along the way. And the Champlain Towers collapse on Miami Beach, and 98 people are killed. And I think hundreds of homes are lost, condominiums. And the firm I was with at the time received phone calls on that case, and we appeared, and the lawsuit was filed right away. And all the attorneys in town who had been retained already on those cases by wrongful death, by the families of wrongful death victims, family members, showed up to court. And Judge Michael Hansman was the judge, and he took appearances. And who's here on behalf of the plaintiffs? And so I was there because some of my partners were away on summer vacation, or away at second homes, and I was in the courtroom. And Judge Michael Hansman, who was the judge I had appeared before in that quadriplegic case, says, "Oh, Miss First, nice to see you. Good to see you. Take a seat." And everyone makes their appearances, dozens of attorneys. And when it came time to set a slate for the leadership of the plaintiff side, right? The plaintiffs, and I'll tell you, in class actions and MDLs, it's common for a slate of leadership attorneys to be proposed on behalf of the class or on behalf of the plaintiffs. They call it a plaintiff steering committee. Maybe some of you know that. And usually in a plaintiff steering committee, you'll have different positions. There'll be lead counsel, there'll be committee chair of wrongful death, there'll be committee chair of an expert committee, all kinds of committees, and people get different roles. And when it came time to submit slates, and Judge Hansman had a chance to review the slate, and not surprisingly, I was not on that slate because they're more, they're older, more established attorneys in town. And I've heard Judge Hansman speak on this, so I'm not saying anything out of school. He looked at it and he thought, I know Rachel First, and she has clients in this case. And I think, I know she'd do a great job, and she'd work really hard. And this slate needs somebody who's going to dig in and be in the weeds and work really hard. And so he slotted me into that role. And that was, an incredible position to be put into, to represent all these people and to lead a team of really talented, impressive attorneys. And it would not have happened if I hadn't, done good work in front of that judge, right? That was really, he had no other firsthand, experience with me. He probably called around, I'm guessing, but that was the impetus. And so I give you that trajectory because building your reputation and building your brand and all those things that I also want to talk about is not just about trial wins. It can happen that way. But we know now, based on statistics, that 99 point something percent of cases resolve by settlement. It's very difficult to get board certified, like Ira Leesfield has. It was probably very difficult then, and it's even more, I mean, to his credit, it wasn't easy, and it's even more difficult now. But you can still stand out with wins and diligence and hard work and building your reputation on the case you're working on today and tomorrow. So I can't stress enough that doing good work on the case in front of you is important, because you might not think people are watching, but they are. Your co-counsel is watching, the partners at your firm are watching, your clients are watching, and the judges are watching too. So that's the building block, right, in my view. And once you have that, you can start to define your niche. I'm gonna call it niche. Tomato, tomato, Ira calls it niche. And that, I couldn't agree more. It's so important. You've got to specialize. There's however many attorneys in this room, and there's probably thousands in Dade County, I would assume. So in order to stand out, even if you can narrow it down to just to doing plaintiff's work, how do you stand out even just in the plaintiff's field, or you want to do defense work, but how you have to specialize and specialize and specialize, I think, to really make a name for yourself. And you're sitting here at this office in a great example of that. The Leesfield firm does all kinds of work, but they are really, I mean, they're known for a lot of it, many things, but they have a national presence, I think, and a reputation for doing outstanding work on admiralty cases and cruise cases. And that's hard to come by, but it's so critical, right? I'm sure they get hundreds and hundreds of calls, if not thousands every year, just for that specialty alone. And defining your niche can happen by happenstance. Sometimes it does. Attorneys they get a case, like a Legionnaire's case, and they say, oh, okay, well, I've already worked so hard on this case, and so now I guess I have a specialty. And I'll give you an example of that in my own career. And that's one way to do it. And that can often be very effective and lucrative. But you can also be more strategic about it, particularly if you're still early in your career and you don't have one yet. If there's something that interests you, make it your business to learn about it. And you may not have a client on it, but as Ira said, you can still write on it. You can still you can go to a conference, you can find ways to interject yourself in the practice that you want to be in and develop that niche. So I'll give you just an example, and business will flow from that. The more esoteric it is, I would almost say, the more likely you are to generate business from that. In my own career, I had an occasion, and this is pretty discreet, but I think it's a good example. We had a medical malpractice case, and it had been referred to medical malpractice arbitration. If you're not steeped in medical malpractice, you may not know this, but at the outset of a case, defendants and plaintiffs have an opportunity to divert into an arbitration process, and it has different rules and different rules of evidence even. And one of the issues that comes up in medical malpractice arbitration is the question of a set-off. Will the defendant be entitled to argue that, or can the defendant argue that defendant is entitled to a set-off from the plaintiff's damages for the amount of the Medicare bills? And that, let me just unpack that a bit. A set-off is when plaintiffs put on a certain amount of damages and defendants said, but we get a set-off for everything Medicare will pay for. And in some cases, particularly if you have a lot of economic damages, like maybe like that quadriplegic client I had, the Medicare damages may be in the millions. Meaning the defendants might have an argument that millions of dollars are going to be paid for by Medicare. So it's a really big issue to plaintiffs' attorneys to try to somehow push back against that set-off argument. And I developed I don't love that Mr. Cole is on this call, but
I'm taking notes.
It's not a secret. I guess it's not a secret, it's out there. So in one of my cases, I thought, I think this is federally preempted by the Medicare Secondary Payer Act. And I think I'm going to file a declaratory judgment action in federal court. And we're going to see how the defendants like arbitrating and also being in federal court. And maybe a federal judge won't agree with me and we'll get kicked out, but let's see how they like that, right? And that did that on one case, and I lectured on it somewhere. And sure enough, I got calls from a number of other firms to sort of do the same thing on their cases. And we were able to create a lot of value through that on a lot of different claims for people, and people found me because that setup is worth a lot of money and word gets out. So I'm just, I'm letting you know that it can, almost the more discreet it is, the more likely it'll take hold. So that's my little anecdote about developing an expertise or a specialty. And I'd like to think that, I think about, well, what is, and that's part of building a brand. Like any product, you are a brand, and building a brand is, what are you known for? And I like to think that I'm known as someone who can handle complex cases, particularly in plaintiffs' cases, particularly in federal court, and also class actions in state court. And that's generally what I get called on. Other cases too, but other attorneys refer me those cases, and clients who I've represented think of me on those cases. And so let's see, once you get a niche and have a brand, I think your next step is thinking about marketing. How am I going to tell people, how are people going to know who I am? How am I going to market my brand? And that I can't really add much more to what Ira said. I think that networking in your day-to-day life is so important. We're going to put aside billboards let's just talk about the marketing that is easy, is a smaller scale. I try to do that. I do kind of the same thing that Ira does. When I meet people and I have substantive conversations with them, all walks of life, I have my cards with me. I hand them my card. I'm an attorney. If you ever need one, here's my card. Take it. You might need it. I just think that's a good habit, and I'm not surprised to hear that we both share it. I also want to echo what Ira said, which is teach, don't sell. And you know what that means, right? Like you can, by publishing articles and by being an authoritative voice on whatever subject it is you know about, you're really marketing yourself. And you're learning things even as associates. Like I said, when I'm working on a case, I just learned a whole lot about the Medicare Secondary Payer Act. Well, you know what? I could give a lecture on this. So it's pretty easy to put it together. You've already done the work. You already have the knowledge as attorneys in your cases. And I do want to touch on like this idea of a digital presence, right? Advertising, marketing digitally. You are in, as a young lawyer, even a different position than I probably am in that the way that we advertise and market as attorneys is changing rapidly with social media and all the things I don't even know about, TikTok, which I'm not on, but it's becoming, learn about it. If you think you might want to open your own firm one day, you should become an expert in how those new platforms work, because I do think that the legal marketing network is, I'll leave it at that, but the landscape is changing rapidly, not just for other companies, but for attorneys as well. And let me pivot, so you got your brand, your niche, your marketing, and I think that all translates to getting business. Of course, whether you're a plaintiff's or a defense attorney, getting business looks vastly different than having clients. Hopefully I have no repeat customers. My clients have died, really, right? Or they've been injured, and hopefully lightning doesn't strike twice. And we don't get a lot of repeat, but what we do get, and again, Ira touched on this, is we get folks who, their family members and their friends and people in their network. So that's the kind of, I guess, repeat customers that plaintiffs attorneys get. But of course, on the defense side, you have an opportunity to build lasting relationships with clients, where if you do good work, they'll keep coming back to you. So that's it's a more straightforward, I think, path for cementing and marketing, cementing relationships and marketing. And then I don't have time to go into all the other tips, but I want to just end on, I gave you my path, and I told you how all these seemingly fortuitous things happen. Of course, they weren't all that fortuitous because a lot of hard work and diligence went into it. But everyone's journey is different. And as a woman, especially, I think, and men too, but as a woman who has children, there were years of my practice where my only ambition was getting to Friday. There was not a lot beyond that, because the day was so time pressured, because I have little kids at home and my nanny is waiting and I got to pick them up at 4:30 or whatever it is, that I was not thinking of having my own firm. I just wanted to get to Friday and do what I had to do on my cases, and that's it. And that's okay, because do good work, stay focused on your career, do what you got to do, and know that it might be a little slower. Those years were not my most, I guess, ambitious years, but that too shall pass, and you can ramp up. And so, I've ramped up. My kids are older, not that old, but they're not, they're old enough to feed themselves, obviously. And I had a little more capacity and a little more time. And so when two of my buddies started a firm and asked me to join them, I said, you know what? I think that sounds like a good idea. And now is probably the time. Now, it never feels like exactly the right time. It was really scary and you're never really ready to take that leap. But my advice would be start before you're ready, because the time will never be exactly right. You'll never feel ready. So I hope that helps. And good luck in your practices.
Before I introduce Justin, who I have a few remarks about his trajectory, let me say about Rachel. I think in the Champlain Towers, in her role on the steering committee, but she didn't mention that she was probably the only non-male of that whole group. I can't think of any other person who was a woman. My sister, and she struggled with the old school. My sister's been a lawyer 40 or 50 years, it was 40 years. It's very tough. It's different. It's very tough. The other thing I want to say, to follow up with something Rachel said, because we are friends now, is that I went to, with Evan and Justin, went to a convention in San Francisco this summer where they were giving an award for the most unique verdict or the most unique result. And the Champlain Towers case was the one that they were giving the award on. So we were there, and I ran into 2 or 3 other people who had worked on the case. Work meaning take the credit mostly. And Rachel wasn't there. I thought that was a little unusual, but we got back, I called, which I would do. So Rachel, you really missed. And as I think you would admire, and I admire, I think the response was, well, my kids had camp visiting day, and I wasn't gonna go to this to give up camp visiting day. You know, that speaks volumes to me. And the last thing I think what Rachel said, which I if I had my other 666 points, is keep reinventing yourself. Don't get bored, don't get locked in. I did years of litigation against the Japanese manufacturers of products liability, maybe 20 years between motorcycles and ATVs. It was all I needed to do in my whole career, those 20 years. I mean, we tried a lot of cases, and it was just a niche, and it was wonderful. So, but then they fixed the defect, and then we went on to cruise ship work, and then we went on to cases involving the church and sexual abuse. Then we went on to Legion. I mean, keep reinventing yourself. You don't get bored, and sometimes it leads to a greater profitability. Now, back to Justin and what Jared Davis said, it was always available, and now that Anthony's here too. Justin started here as a law clerk, and there wasn't anything as a law clerk and a young lawyer that Justin got asked to do that he didn't do and do well. Anything. And Anthony, for your benefit, he just, that was just who his nature was. Justin has an amazing wife, Karina, who my wife and his wife and Justin and I are all very friendly with, very lucky to have that relationship. And she's very supportive. She's a great mom of 2 boys, and we were just out with them all for dinner last Friday. So Justin epitomizes what I would look for in a growing, up and coming lawyer, to take responsibility, respect, integrity, intelligence, all of that stuff, hard work. And so I thought it'd be great to have him sort of close this out. And since we're sort of moving towards the dinner hour, we do have some snacks or food we can hang around here a little while. Albert and Carmen are going to do a great job. And what I said before about staff, we went down to Key West and put on a program last Thursday for the Monroe County Bar Association. We had a really good turnout. But Sophie was there, Albert was there, our 2 of our lawyers were there, and you just can't do it alone. And I would never say that anything, you have an office manager of 48 years or 37 years, or a receptionist, which Grace is much more than that for 37 years. You're not cutting through the icebergs alone there. You've got people all over helping, and we do. And so that's it. Justin, I really look forward to hearing what you
Appreciate it, Ira. I'm going to sit as well. So I have a handful of notes here that I was going to share with the group, and Ira stole a lot of my thunder, and I think the reason for that is because everything I learned about building a practice, I learned from Ira. I literally have in my notes here, do you know how many people the bartender meets throughout a day? So I'm not going to bore you with the repetition, although it's true. The one thing that I would say to this group, especially at this age and at this stage of your careers, is do not get discouraged if you cannot build your network overnight or in 1 year or even 3 years or 5 years. It takes time. You're building something, you're planting seeds, you have to cast a wide net, keep your head down, and you need to work at it and work at it and work at it. And the doors are going to open up. The floodgates are going to open up for you if you are relentless about it and you don't get discouraged. I see so many people out there get discouraged about it. And this is something, frankly, that I struggled with. You know, my first year or 2 or 3, we typically work on bigger cases here, and those are not easy for a first year or a second year lawyer to bring in. And I've had this conversation with Ira many times. It took a while for those gates to open up for me, and I'm glad I did not get discouraged. So my advice would be, don't be shy. You can't build a network if you're shy. You will never regret going up to someone and saying, hi, I'm Anthony Dominguez. Unless your name is not Anthony Dominguez, but you'll never regret it. That's what people are here for at an event like this, or even if you're not at an event like this. No one's going to feel embarrassed if you go up and you introduce yourself, tell people what you do, hand them a business card, follow up with them on LinkedIn, online, whatever social media you have, and foster new relationships, foster the old relationships. You know, there are lots of people in law school who I haven't seen in a long time, but I keep up with them on social media, on LinkedIn. If they have an accomplishment, I congratulate them. I don't want to die in their minds. They're part of my network. They should be part of your network, your classmates, your hairstylist, your barber. God forbid I ever go out to a restaurant with Ira and I don't give a business card to the server. I'm going to get criticized for it, and rightfully so. You know, we preach that around here, and you never know if a month later or a year later you get a call and, you know, hey, I was serving you at Barry's and I remember you guys were such great guys, and I have this case, you know, my aunt, my sister, whoever it is. You don't know where your next big case or big client is going to come from. So cast that big wide net and keep at it until it opens up. It may not be overnight, it may not be in the first few years, but you can't quit on it because your future depends on it. Your career, your prosperity, your fulfillment, your enjoyment all depends on these principles. Make sure you're doing everything you can, because let me tell you, it's not easy, but the formula is simple. And that is always be out there, always be talking, and you know, you got to keep at it. You can't get discouraged, you can't quit on it. That's what I found to be most helpful as I've built my network. I am starting to get the calls that I was worried I never would get, and they're coming fast and furious. I couldn't be happier that I just didn't get discouraged, I didn't quit on it. So those are my experiences. Does anyone have any questions for Ira or Rachel? You guys were wonderful, Rachel. It was great to hear your perspective. I've heard Ira's for 15 years, so he knows I appreciate what he has to say, but that was just wonderful, Rachel. I know about you and your successes and your results, but to hear it from you and to hear the whole story was just wonderful. And I do want to keep some time for a little chat, you know, between everybody so we can all get to know each other. But does anyone have any questions for Rachel or for Ira tonight?
or thoughts or contributions or experiences. I think that's what's missing. I've never worked really in a big firm, but I think the camaraderie, the idea of I was in a small firm, we had lunch together every Wednesday, and, after work, if you stayed after work, the firm paid for dinner. We often worked late at night, but I think that's what's missing. It's very hard in a larger firm to have that type of interaction and exchange. And so things like this, I think Justice Lewis said, Ira, how much structure are you going to put to this? I said, as little as possible. I said, it's not a seminar. It's not a lecture. I said, we're getting together. It's a conversation. And Fred is, he's just amazing. We've worked together since he left the bench, and it's wonderful to have him as a resource in here, as it is to have Richard and Rick.
I have a couple of comments if you're interested.
What, Rick?
I said I have a couple of comments if you're interested.
You want to hear that for sure.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. You all started, and I agree with almost 100% of what you said, but you started with talking about specializing, and it was important to specialize. I actually think, depending on the age bracket of who's attending the seminar, I would do just the reverse. We're a big insurance defense firm. We do other stuff too, but that's really what we do. And I would encourage people to be more broad in the kind of cases that they get involved in, as opposed to, let's just say they're in an automobile accident group. I would encourage them to try other things too, because you don't really know what you're going to be excited about and what you're going to get good at when you're brand new out of law school. And so what I started doing, and I was at Walton Landtaff, 50 years ago, it was just different. And I learned from the experience, and I got a lot of trials representing those kind of carriers. But later, I ended up representing the AICPA in all their serious cases in Florida. And it just evolved over time. So I would say to the younger people that are attending, don't pigeonhole yourself right in the beginning of your career. Try things. The second thing I would say, and it's very consistent with what you all are talking about, is get involved in organizations. Don't just join them. I'll give you an example, the Dade County Bar Association, and there's others too. Don't just have your name in it. If you're going to get in it, go and do a good job. People will remember when you do a good job, and they'll remember when all you did was have your name there and you never participated in anything. And so to me, I almost never tried to join anything that I didn't want to get in the leadership, and that requires work, whether it's American Board of Trial Advocates or whether it's the Dade County Bar. I went and volunteered to represent Jerry Wetherington when he was the chief judge, because they didn't have lawyers to help them. And Wetherington looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but he said, as long as you don't handle cases in front of me, thank you. And I did. So I represented him for probably 2 years while he was chief judge of the Dade County courts. And I'm not saying you all can do that today, but get involved in an organization and do a good job at it. And people will remember you, and if it's plaintiffs' lawyers, they'll send you cases. If it's defense, they'll refer conflicts to you. The next thing I would say is, don't make enemies of everybody you litigate with. We see way too much of that. And I'll be honest, I don't think the judges put enough of a stop to it today. When I was a younger lawyer, they wouldn't put up with it for a second. Today, I think they tend to put up with things more, probably because of Zoom is how all the hearings are going. But I met Tom Scott when he was the plaintiff's lawyer trying a case against me. And now all these years later, the name of the firm is Cole Scott. And, he had quite a career. But you all need to make friends with people that you litigate with. You don't have to be enemies. And the thing that's unfortunate today, without having hearings down in the courthouse all the time, Ira, you and I know we used to go down there, we'd have a hearing, and then we'd go get a cup of coffee. That was just standard operating procedure, and you didn't make enemies out of everybody that you litigated with. Today, I see some of our young lawyers too quick to think somebody that did something, oh, that's unethical. Well, not necessarily. Come on, they're new at it too. So I would suggest that kind of thing to you. And the final thing I would say is, and totally consistent with what you are talking about, is this writing. It doesn't necessarily have to be a treatise that you're publishing in the Florida bar or elsewhere, writing simple things like newsletters to clients on interesting issues creates a reputation for you that other people simply won't do. And I think if you all will do that as a younger group, first, the senior people will be very impressed you volunteered to do it. And second, the clients are going to start looking at your name on this thing and saying, I'm going to call Joe or Sam or Sarah and talk to them about this matter. And then you get it referred to you. So those would be my comments, even though I wasn't asked for them.
Well, they are asked for, Richard, and your involvement is very much appreciated, and we're going to continue in future. I think you and Jared are going to conduct those sessions also for the perspective of large firms. But Judge Suarez, you know, I guess you and I have had 50 conversations over our life about the practice of law, life too. But what do you think about what you've heard today?
I've made a list of things here, and everything, almost everything that I have here, the two of you, the three of you have discussed. We're on the same line and page. Number one, the most important thing is your reputation. And that, bar none, is the most important thing.
Yeah.
You want a reputation, not only among the judges, but among your fellow attorneys, that this is a good attorney who's going to be straightforward and honest with you. And if the attorney appears before a judge or calls you up and says, look at this case. This case stands for this proposition. You want that judge to right away say, I know I can rely on him because we talk to each other. Who can you rely on? Who can you not rely on? And who do you have to follow up with? Publish, very important. If you can publish, write and publish, it's great. You know, small articles. It doesn't have to be a great big treatise. Just a small article somewhere about something. When you meet somebody, which is so important, I'm so glad to hear everybody talk about it, and you pass out your card, even though I was with an insurance defense firm, I was with the old Corlett Killian firm. Richard knew Ed, and
Very well.
you know, and Frank Shepard and that group. When you meet somebody, I would still give out my cards. I belonged to the bar. I was active in the Dade County bar. I was active in the Florida bar. And if I would meet people and I'd give my card out and I'd get a card from somebody, within that week, I would sit down and in those days do a short letter. Gee, you know, Ira, it was great to meet you at such and such. Good to see you. Let's try and get together for lunch sometime. That's all you have to do. It takes 5 minutes and you do it right away and it takes care of everything. The other thing I wanted to stress was two things. I don't know how many are there, Ira, that are almost directly out of law school or a year out of law school, are with firms and are learning. What Ira said, I used to do the same thing. I used to go in on Saturdays and read files. I would go in and read depositions of senior partners. I would go in and read motions. I would go in and read briefs from the appellate division just to get an idea of what's going on and follow through with that. It's very important if you can do that from a learning proposition. And the other thing was, there's not a lot of trials going on. Not like when I was young, when I started, we were constantly in trial. And the generation before me, the Ed Corlett generation, they would try 2 and 3 lawsuits a week. I mean, you'd pick a jury one day, you'd do it, you'd close the next day, you go into trial the next day. I didn't have that much, but we still had a lot of trials to do. If you're with a firm and you're able to, ask one of the senior partners, ask one of the senior associates, you have a trial coming up. Can I do one of the witnesses? Can I go over with you? Can I sit in? Can I do this? And learn from that perspective. Also, the judges get to know you, the attorneys get to know you. I could go on, but I think we've covered almost everything. We were right on the same line all the way down.
Well, Rick, thank you. And there's about 20 of us sitting here, I think, that feel like we've spent a valuable 90 minutes together. And we're going to do this every month, it looks like. We have it scheduled, and some of the programs are very different, the programs involving the judges. Because I know that Judge Moreno and Judge Cox and Judge Altman and others have specific perspectives on this, and Judge Dietrich Schorweiler. And so we're going to do a lot with the judges. The bar is involved, I guess I'm enthusiastic as part of my thought process about reinventing yourself. This seems to be a natural thing to do, and that is to take a lifetime of work and share it. The bumps in the road, the good stuff, the bad stuff. That's what we're going to do. And Richard, I thank you and Rick for joining us today. We'll see you here live someday soon too. So we're going to go get some food. We have enough dinner.
A pleasure.
Please.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
And I want to introduce myself if I haven't had the chance to meet any of you. My name is Patricia Gegsnight, and I'm with Green School Martyr. Ira, I really appreciated your golden rules, and Rachel. More specifically, I have a question that I think a lot of us probably have on our minds. How, Ira, you were talking about, on Saturdays going in, how Judge Suarez said the same thing, reading transcripts, and Rachel, you mentioned about, having to make time for your kids. So my question is more specifically about time management, right? Because all of us who are at firms, we have to, meet billboard requirements, or we have to, balance other responsibilities and networking events. If there's any tips you could give, that would be greatly appreciated.
Well, Rachel, I think you probably have more of that, the balancing stuff. I will just tell you point blank that I have a family too, and they lost out, and I lost out in the early years. I think that I was like, I took my children on the weekends, maybe, and we had a great time, but my wife, my wife of 58 years, as a matter of fact, she was very dedicated to my career. And so, Rachel, I think you probably have a more insightful experience.
Maybe, hopefully. So we'll try. But similar, so Patricia, my first 5 years or so, I worked at a big firm, and I also had a billable requirement. I found, which I met and exceeded, I didn't have children really until the very end of that. And I can't say I ever said no to an opportunity or an assignment. I felt like, you were to do well and to get great assignments and to build your reputation as someone who was dependable. You really kind of had, it was yes. I worked really hard at your case. So there wasn't a lot of time management tips that came out of that situation. I think that once I had children and I had to kind of manage my time, I did transition to a firm and a work life where I thought I could better balance it. It doesn't mean that you can't do it at White and Case. It really depends. I don't know if you have children or not. It really depends on how a lot of women do. Depends on how your family is set up, what kind of support system you have in town. But this maybe isn't a great answer, but certain practices just do not lend themselves to, being home at 5 every day. So you might have to pivot if you want to do that, right? Or you want to be home at 5 or 6 or whatever it is every day. You might need to transition to a practice that lends itself more to that, whether it's, which those are, but they do exist. Those are tips.
What about some other thoughts or ideas? And they also say that we're trying to do this monthly, and if you all have friends that you think would benefit, you can see we have 20 people here, but we have room. I think we could have a few more, 2 or 3 more. Tell your friends they're welcome to come. We'll send out another notice. Evan is the liaisons of all that, and making sure that people are kept apprised. The judges are very interested. Judge Moreno called today and said, I've got a jury trial this week. Which is a criminal case. They want to watch trial. So the courts are very interested in this. They want to see jury trials. They want to see lawyers. They don't have much of a job as a judge if there's no trying cases, and all they're hearing is discovery motions. So if you have friends or people you think would benefit from the program, just make sure they get signed up with Evan quickly, because this program was really full right from the get-go. Any other thoughts? Would you have some refreshments and time to socialize